Taoiseach, I want to discuss with you the growing disconnect between your government's stated aspirations on energy and the reality on the ground. This week, your government are asking the Dáil to vote for emergency generators. They'll run on LPG or liquefied petroleum gas. Crucially, they'll also have the capacity to run on green hydrogen if and when that becomes available. One of the first acts that your government did was to announce an exploration ban on the extraction of oil or gas in Irish waters. And there are, I'm told, people in the energy sector who wish to explore for gas, particularly off the west coast where there is infrastructure. The crucial difference between gas that's coming in from the west coast of Ireland and LPG is that the carbon footprint of LPG is far higher, because not alone do we burn it, we have the energy used to transport it here. So obviously you couldn't have predicted the energy crisis when you announced that ban. Will you now revisit it in light of what we know now? One of the rationales that was posited at the time was that by keeping fossil fuels in the ground, we will incentivise the use of sustainable alternatives. But that didn't happen. The European Commission said that Ireland and Denmark were the two countries most suitable for the production of biomethane. Denmark now produces 1/4 of its gas needs are biomethane. They're saying that they'll meet 100% by 2034. We don't produce any of any significance. There was an EU scheme announced where billions of euros were available for countries to meet the energy crisis so that they could develop their biomethane sectors. I asked you about this before, Taoiseach. You said I'd get a direct reply from the Minister. Only after I asked him was I found out that we didn't even apply for that scheme. Italy are getting almost 5 billion euros to develop their biomethane sector. Yeah, Taoiseach, it's money that can be used to provide an alternative to carbon, which is your government's stated intention. But what's happening on the ground is there are farmers groups across the country who are willing to develop the biomethane sector. They're begging for support. There was an opportunity to get it from the European Commission. You didn't avail of it. We're told wind is the answer, and in particular offshore wind. At the moment, we produce 24 megawatts of offshore energy. Scotland, by comparison, and Ireland is the country in the world, or in Europe at least, most suitable for it. Scotland produces 1.9 gigawatts, 1,900 megawatts. Scotland is going to up its, is hoping to increase that to 11 gigawatts by 2030. We're hoping to go from five. We've recently upped our target from 5 to 7. But any international investor is going to look at our track record to date in determining whether to invest. And ours, Taoiseach, does not match our rhetoric.
That ban on exploration, my understanding, no, and I stand to be corrected here, was an Oireachtas decision, or was a recommendation from the Oireachtas committee, as well as in the last Dáil, actually. Sorry? No, I think the Oireachtas committee on climate decided, except by a majority vote, if I'm correct, that we would ban exploration in terms of oil and gas. Why? Because we wanted to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. Why? Because we wanted to deal with the issue of climate change, because climate change is existential. And we have to start. And the danger then being that if we kept on doing the exploration, doing the oil and the gas, we would reduce any incentives towards going towards renewable. And that's been the challenge. Now, no one saw the war in Ukraine coming. No one saw the degree to which very rapidly now Europe has had to reduce its dependency on Russian gas and oil, with countries scrambling all over looking for LNG across the board. We import the majority of our gas from the United Kingdom, who also takes supplies from Norway. So about 75% of our gas comes from the UK, 25% from Corrib. And then we have developed well in terms of onshore wind. We're now on the cusp of a very significant development in terms of offshore wind. Yes, and the consents have been activated now in respect of the East Coast. Auctions will take place, and you're going to see the first phase of a significant offshore wind energy projects underway. And that has been assisted by the fact that the legislation around maritime permits and so on has been brought through this House last year. McNamara has been established. Advertisements for positions for McNamara are now underway, and it's envisaged that McNamara will be established early next year. There is a genuine desire, and you've articulated, to move faster in respect of this, and Minister Ryan is of that view also. The European Union is of the view that we need to fast-track the permitting system. And it is introducing a regulation which would provide for an overwhelming public interest clause which would override other objections to offshore wind in the interest of the public good, to get as much offshore wind energy in place so as to permanently reduce and eliminate our dependence on fossil fuels. All of that is accelerating across Europe because of the war in Ukraine, and people want to reduce very quickly now their dependence on Russian gas and oil, which has happened. I mean, it's been an extraordinary sort of development. If you think about it, I think Russian gas now accounts for something close to 10% compared to where it was at the beginning of the year. It's been an extraordinary achievement by the European Union. Gas storage is at 80 or 90% across Europe. So it just shows what can be done out of necessity. But that is the agenda ahead of us in terms of our security of supply.
But the reality is that people who want to invest in the biomethane sector in Europe are not coming to Ireland to invest. They're going elsewhere because we don't have the structures within which they can invest, and we didn't even apply to the European Union for that money. The reality is, Taoiseach, that Moneypoint is gearing up production as a time that we're saying, well, actually, we're going to bring green energy. We're going to create green hydrogen at Moneypoint. We're going to bring offshore energy ashore at Moneypoint. But that reality is further away now than ever, because the investors that were going to work, who bring both the money and the technology to bear, are walking away shaking their heads from Ireland, and they're going to Scotland because of our failure. I don't know why they're moving away, but I'm told they're moving away because of an inability to put frameworks in place where they can actually invest money, and instead they're going to Scotland. And you see 24 megawatts currently in Scotland, 1,000, or in Ireland, 1,900 in Scotland. You're right, consents are now only being given out for phase 1. But for phase 2 is where the floating energy will be, that will develop this green energy or green hydrogen that might someday fuel these emergency generators. They need to know now, will power to X be included in that? Because we have data centres that can directly take power from offshore generation, if they're allowed to do so. Will they be allowed? And what will the criteria be? Because we're hopelessly behind, and we will not attract international investment without certainty.
The Minister for Energy, Eamon Ryan, in this respect, with CRU and with EirGrid and the department, they form a board to try and accelerate the offshore wind initiative. And the desire of the states to do this in a controlled, organised way, not in a Wild West way, because it is a natural resource. It's a national resource that belongs to the Irish people. So it has to be done on a programmed way. There are many, many investors who are in a hurry. I understand that fully. And I know what's happening across, in terms of Scotland. I understand that they're moving at pace. And we acknowledge here that we need to up our pace as well, in terms of speeding up the degree to which we can get these projects in place. Certainly before the end of the decade. We've already increased our target towards the end, in terms of the end of the decade in respect of offshore wind, and in terms of hydrogen and so on. But there's being no doubt of the government's commitment in respect of the funding. I think you're talking about loan facilities. Given the interest rates that we were borrowing at, we didn't need to, if that's the same scheme, we didn't need to be going to the European Union facility to be borrowing at rates that we could borrow cheaper ourselves at, and in some instances we don't need to borrow for this.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Given the surpluses we've had.
Thank you. That's good. Thank you.
Sorry?
The Purchells think they move at pace.
They get to their destination.
Thank you very much.